The following podcast is brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at WrestlingWithJohners.com.
And hello again, wrestling fans. Welcome to another edition of This Week in History. We are going to look at the week of June 10th through 16th. We have a lot of events to go through, a lot of title changes. We'll look at Sherri Martel and Bayley in our Superstar Spotlights. So a lot to get to. We want to thank you for joining us on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else you get your podcast from. We are on Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook, so you can always watch us visually. And be sure to contact us for anything. Send us your suggestions. We're going to be reformatting this after we get through the this year again, and we'll see what that comes about. That's still about 5 months away-ish before we end up there, but I have a couple ideas. Share yours with us. We are sponsored by Coolbet. Stay cool but responsibly, and also part of the Johners Podcasting Network, the Ontario Independent Podcasting Network, and of course our other sponsor, Hammerlock Pure Wrestling, bringing back the golden age of pro wrestling. And be sure to catch us in Strathroy on July 16th and Stratford on July 9th. July 9th will be at the Job Site Brewing Company, and that will be doors at 6 o'clock, bell time is 7. Tickets are just $20 and available through Job Site Brewing Company Limited in Stratford. And, of course, the following weekend, as I said, Nancy Powers Photography presents Hammerlock Pure Wrestling at the Portuguese Canadian Club of Strathroy, Ontario. And doors open at 6, bell time 7. Brickhouse Mick McGuire going against Tyson Dukes in the main event is going to be one of our biggest cards to date. You don't want to miss it. Family friendly and always a fun time. 2 hours guaranteed, in and out, and you won't regret it at all. So come and join us, Hammerlock Pure Wrestling. But we're here to talk about history and can't do that until we go over to Niagara Falls and see Jonesy. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great this evening. Ready to go through history of wrestling.
Excellent. And at the end of the show, you got a couple things that you need to plug about events happening around the London area. So we'll have our fans stand by for that and invite them down to this area for those events that you're a part of.
Indeed.
So without any further ado, let's dive in with some headlines.
26 years ago, June 10th, 1996, on Nitro from Wheeling, West Virginia, Kevin Nash makes his return to WCW as Scott Hall's big surprise. And Nash wasn't there to play. This would be the last time Raw beat Nitro in the ratings until April of 98. 20 years ago, June 10th, 2002, Stone Cold Steve Austin walks out on the WWE just hours before Raw. This would be the second time Austin would walk out that year. Austin was not happy with the storyline and didn't want to lose his equity to increase ratings. He was scheduled to start a feud with Brock Lesnar. Austin wouldn't return to the WWE until the next February.
Well, I'm not actually sure if there was actually a feud in the making there. They just wanted to have a very cold matchup of Austin versus Brock to get Brock into the King of the Ring. And yeah, it would have been a huge feather in Brock's cap to do so. But Austin's theory was, and not talking about Austin Theory, the wrestler, but Stone Cold Steve Austin thought, why do this so cold with no build-up? It was just, blah, here you go. And obviously there was a lot of other issues going on prior to that this was the last straw, and he walked out. Thankfully, he did return, and the rest was history.
But why does everything need a build? Not everything used to get a build. It would just be, here's two guys, here's a match, kind of trying out. And that's how feuds can start is because of a match.
Understandable. And, I think it was this, unfortunately, the ego of Steve Austin with being the top guy. He didn't really put the top guy in that position, in at least his view. And, there's some credit to that. And also the other way of it's your job, do what you're asked to do. And things could have been better and bigger for him. But I think there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on with him because we'll find out in just a couple of minutes what also happened after he walked out.
Yes, and I know that he did change his opinion on this in some interview. Don't ask me which one. And for that episode of Raw, the focus would move to Ric Flair and McMahon's feud. Vince McMahon defeated Ric Flair in a no-holds-barred match to become the 100% owner of the WWE. 14 years ago, June 10th, 2008, Karen Tyrell, a finalist in the 2007 WWE Diva Search, made her WWE television debut as Tiffany, the assistant of EC General Manager Teddy Long. 15 years ago, June 11th, 2007, WWE presented the 2007 WWE Draft Lottery on a special edition of Raw. This time around, the wrestlers competed in matches to earn draft picks for their respective brands. The winning brand would win one random wrestler from another brand. But that's not all that happened that night. It was Mr. McMahon's appreciation night. Vinny was losing it after losing the ECW championship. Many superstars were there to cheer him up, but buried Vinny instead. Left dejected, McMahon would walk to his limo, all sad, get in the limo, and then the limo blew up. This caused some backlash for this angle, but it was to end with a funeral for the chairman, but the story was scrapped after the Benoit incident 2 weeks later. Vinny would resurface unharmed in early August of that year.
Yeah, that also was the night that good old, Paul London ended up basically losing his job because he must have known what was coming up. And as Vince was going past everybody, all dejected, Paul London was actually laughing. And that didn't set well. And thanks for coming out, Paul London. And here's your walking papers. I think also it was supposed to lead to the illegitimate son coming up with Mr. Kennedy being the son and all this other stuff. But then, yeah, as you mentioned, the Benoit incident happened and Vince had to resurface there as Vince McMahon, not Mr. McMahon. And then August, Mr. McMahon was back. And they really didn't explain that story away.
June 12th, 2001, former WCW Nitro hottie Stacy Keibler made her WWF debut.
My all-time favorite Nitro girl.
Yeah, she is pretty. 19 years ago, June 12th, 2003, David Sahadi, a longtime employee of the WWE, gave his notice of impending resignation from his post as creative director of on-air promotions for the WWE. Sahadi and his team were behind some of the most memorable vignettes and promos, such as the Billionaire Ted skits, a black and white vignette featuring WWF legends at WrestleMania 14, and the WWF signature openings during the Attitude Era. His team won the Pro Max Gold Medal. He would end up working for TNA for years to come.
Yeah, super talented guy. I hear a lot about him when videos come up during some watch-along podcasts with Conrad Thompson and whoever he's with. A lot going on with that. It looks like Chris actually dropped off for a moment, but I'm going to continue with our history. And 10 years ago on June 12th, 2012, the WWE taped the 67th episode and final episode of NXT Redemption, which would air the following day. The show began as a second chance for NXT contestants from past seasons that didn't make the roster. Derek Bateman, who later became EC3, Titus O'Neil, Darren Young were the unrecognized co-winners. Of course, they did finally make it up to the main roster, and we ended up getting the new version of NXT from the Performance Center and different areas that it was at Full Sail as well. And it was an actual promotion as opposed to the competition thing that they were doing, which was horrible. And Jonesy is back. Your thoughts on the competition version of NXT?
I didn't really like it, actually.
Yeah, it was kind of...
I don't know. It seems silly, especially after they done the... my mind's drawing a blank. The Tough Enough series.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they did this, which was like kooky games. I didn't care for it at all. Though at least it did eventually bring on NXT the way that we, I guess, knew it, because it's changed again.
Yeah, the proper way. 8 years ago, on June 12th, 2014, WWE released nearly a dozen talent due to poor outlook after WWE Network falls short of their goal, and television rights didn't bring in the amount they forecasted. So a bunch of WWE superstars were released. Among the list are some that have made their way back to the company in the years since. Those include JTG, Drew McIntyre, Jinder Mahal, Oksana, Kurt Hawkins, Teddy Long, Camacho, Brodus Clay, Evan Bourne, Yoshitatsu, and referee Mark Harris. 16 years ago, on June 13th, 2006, WWE presented the first episode of the reboot ECW. In the opening segment, Rob Van Dam was presented the ECW Championship. RVD was also the WWE Championship champion at the time, because he had just beat John Cena at One Night Stand, and included in that show was a 19-year-old Barbie Blank making her debut as the exhibitionist Kelly for Kelly's Expose, and nobody will forget the fact that the first show opened with the Sandman beating the living hell out of the Zombie. Yes, the Zombie, because they were on Sci-Fi, and Sci-Fi wanted to have some sci-fi type characters. That lasted the whole 30 seconds that Sandman took to beat the hell out of the Zombie. And we never saw stupid things like that again, unless you want to count Kevin Thorne and Ariel doing the vampire gimmick. And the last couple things here for the headlines. 20 years ago, on June 15th, 2002, in San Antonio, Texas, cops were called to the home of Steve Austin and Deborah Williams, reported that Steve beat her up and leaving welts and bruises on her face and back. Austin booked it out of there and got 2 months, and 2 months later would return and turn himself into Baxter County, Texas authorities. Steve was ordered, sentenced to 1 year probation, fined $1,000, forced to attend How to Not Hit Your Wife seminar. No beer for him for a year. Well, at least he did end up drinking near beer when he was on TV. So, as I said, the downward spiral of that week of Austin walking out, there was more going on than just you're going to lose to Brock Lesnar. 13 years ago.
20 years later, he's like really made a turnaround. His career is strong. Yes, he's not in the ring. Well, he was at WrestleMania, but
he headlined WrestleMania.
Yeah, which it shouldn't have been a headline spot, but hey.
And he's doing cold calls with Ice-T for Tide.
I hate those commercials.
13 years ago, on June 15th, 2009, Vince McMahon announces that he sold Monday Night Raw to Donald Trump. Trump's first order was a commercial-free Raw and a three-for-all, having all three brand champions defend. Trump would last only a week as the stock fell 7%, ending the storyline. Of course, they couldn't differentiate between story and real life.
Nope.
24 years ago, on June 16th, 1998, WWE Raw's War taping in Austin, Adam Copeland made his WWF television debut as the Tortured Soul Edge. His opponent was Jorge Estrada, and he was hurt following a somersault to the outside by Edge when his right leg landed badly on Estrada's head and injured his neck. Edge would win by countout. And those are the headlines for this week. On to some deaths.
Yes, deaths. Oh, yes. We got 46 years ago, June 11th, 1976, James Irvin Mont, professionally known as Joseph Raymond Mont, a.k.a. Toots Mont, died after a long battle with pneumonia. He was 82. He entered our Earth realm on January 18th, 1894 in Garden Grove, Iowa. Mont would begin wrestling at the age of 18. He would have his first wrestling lesson given to him by Jack Taylor. He would join the camp of Ed the Strangler Lewis and would serve as a jack of all trades for Lewis, sparring partner, trainer, opponent, and police officer. Mont and Lewis would work on new holds and counters and would combine Greco-Roman and freestyle wrestling and called it, well, it's not there now, but oh well. Mont, along with Lewis and manager Billy Sandow, would revolutionize the business together and be known as the Gold Dust Trio. Lewis and Sandow would serve as bookers and agents for the wrestlers at their events. Mont would introduce time limits and scripted finishes for matches. The new style of slam bam wrestling style worked and took wrestling out of burlesque theaters and shitty halls and into major sporting venues. And of course, there's a lot more to this man's story, and you can look it up. He is the guy that created the first, he's the guy that created the fictional story of Buddy Rogers winning a tournament in Rio de Janeiro to become the first WWF champion following the split from the NWA.
It's amazing how many tournaments happened mysteriously in Rio de Janeiro and titles are on the line.
Well, especially back then you could do it because, it was harder to prove that it wasn't happening. He would be entered into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2008 and the WWE Hall of Fame as a legacy member back in 2017. Another death 40 years ago, June 13th, 1992, Peter I don't even know that second name. Peter Anderson, known later as Fanane Lefi Pita Maivia, a.k.a. High Chief Peter Maivia, died of cancer in Hawaii. He was only 45. Maivia, the maternal grandfather of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, is a member of the Inoue family, and did you know that he had a small role in the 1967 James Bond movie, You Only Live Twice. And he also served as an uncredited stunt coordinator as well. In 2008, Maivia was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And now on to her superstar spotlight with one of my favorites, the sensational and very hot Queen Sherri. Shawn?
Yeah, I'm going to got a huge rundown of here, but easiest thing to do is read our slide here. Sensational Sherri was born February 8th, 1958 in Birmingham, Alabama. She died, unfortunately, June 15th, 2007 at the age of 49. She debuted in wrestling in 1980 and retired in 2006, so just a year before her passing. She was trained by Donna Cristianello and the Fabulous Moolah. She ended up working for the AWA, WWF, ECW, WCW, and had a brief appearance in TNA. Some of her characters that you may or may not be familiar with is the fact that she was Peggy Sue, the girlfriend of the Honky Tonk Man, whenever Honky needed her or Jimmy wasn't around, or both of them were at ringside to support and cheat for Honky. Peggy Sue was Sherri Martel. She also was Queen Sherri with Macho Man Randy Savage as Macho King. Sensuous Sherri with, I believe that was with Ric Flair. Scary Sherri was what Brutus Beefcake called her. And Sister Sherri with Harlem Heat. And speaking of people that she managed, she had Doug Summers and Buddy Rose in AWA, the Honky Tonk Man, Randy Savage, Shawn Michaels, Ted DiBiase, Ric Flair, Harlem Heat, and Bobby Roode in her brief appearance with TNA. She was a 3-time AWA Women's Champion, a 1-time IWA Women's Champion, 1-time WWF Women's Champion, and she's been inducted into the Cauliflower Alley Club as an honoree in 1994, Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2014, WWE Hall of Fame in 2006, and she was there to accept it. And Wrestling Observer Newsletter named her Manager of the Year in 1991. So a very distinguished career for Sherri Martel. And since Jonesy is a fan of hers, he can tell more about her.
Sure, I can.
Share any of your memories or your thoughts on her?
Well, she was one of my favorites. I do remember seeing her at the London Gardens being press slammed by the Ultimate Warrior after a match. I believe it was with Macho King back in that time. Great lady. As far as, imagine if she now was around, I think she'd adapted the style quite well. It was kind of too bad that she didn't get to wrestle as much as I'd like to see her actually wrestle and maybe dig up some old matches of hers, because she seemed more of a manager than a wrestler, but she was actually more of a wrestler than actually she was kind of both, I guess you would say, because man, did she do good as a manager.
Yeah, and she was able to take bumps from the stars. You always saw Hogan and Beefcake and Warrior beating her up, and that was allowed at the time. Not so sure about now, but I also remember Elizabeth taking the loaded purse of Sherri's and whacking her with it at SummerSlam. So, as you said, if Sherri was around today and in this era wrestling, she probably would have given people like Serena Deeb, Britt Baker, definitely, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch a good run for their money.
And she was quite the kisser, asked Rowdy Piper.
There you go. And we'll move on to more birthdays before switching over to some big events.
All right, on June 10th, Diona Purrazzo was born in 1994.
Turning 28.
Turning 28, there we go. June 11th, Haikura Shida was born in 1988. I don't know where the birth dates went of how old they are.
I can fill in the blanks. Okay. Sorry, my apologies. She is 34.
June 11th, Mike Enos was born in 1963, so I'm going to say he's 59.
59, yep.
Awesome. June 11th, it's a happy 63rd birthday for Terrence Wayne Terry Allen, a.k.a. Magnum TA. This Tom Selleck-looking wrestler had a short career after a car accident ended his in-ring career. Magnum was a 2-time NWA U.S. champ and was looking to become a world champ before his Porsche crashed into a telephone pole. He is the stepfather of wrestling prodigy Tessa Blanchard and the godfather of Cody Rhodes. If you haven't really heard of him or seen his matches, go take a look back. Really good wrestler, huge guy. Definitely looked a lot like Magnum PI, hence his name. June 12th, Mark Henry, born in 1971, so he turns 51, I believe. Jerry Lynn, same day, 1963, so he's 59. Jacques Rougeau on June 13th. He was born in 1962, making him 62 years old, I think. Yes. Virgil, he shares that same birthday. He was born in 1962, 2 years younger than Jacques Rougeau. And also on the 13th, Headbanger Thrasher is surprisingly born in 1969. He turns 54. And also on June 13th would have been the 71st birthday of AAA founder Antonio Hippolito Pina Harada. Pina was AAA's Vince McMahon, as he had the final say on all matters in the company. And finally, June 13th, it's a happy 79th birthday for Australian-born Otto Wanz. Wanz was the creator of the Catch Wrestling Association, a promotion that mixed mat wrestling with strongman competitions. It was popular in Europe. He would hold that title 4 times. He also wrestled for New Japan Pro and had a 15-month run as AWA World Heavyweight Champion. He's on the short list of people who had body slammed both Andre the Giant and Yokozuna. And we'll go to Shawn for the beginning of the big events.
Yeah, and Otto Wanz, when I was looking for photos, he got really big and almost like a beach ball with legs.
Beach ball with legs.
Yeah, as I said, moving on to big events. 27 years ago, on June 10th, 1995, AAA presented Triple Mania 3, Part A, from Mexico. 17 years ago, on June 10th, 2005, Hardcore Homecoming was presented from Philadelphia. This show was put together by former ECW champ Shane Douglas, Mark Keenan, formerly known as Cody Michaels, and Jeremy Borash. 10 years ago, on June 10th, 2012, TNA presented Slammiversary from College Park Center in Arlington, Texas. Former WWE and NWA champion Christian Cage would make a cameo appearance. This was a deal between the two companies to, I believe, let Ric Flair be inducted into the Hall of Fame, so they allowed Christian to go over to TNA for that show. 23 years ago, on June 11th, 1999, AAA presented Triple Mania 7 from Mexico. 22 years ago, on June 11th, 2000, WCW presented The Great American Bash from Baltimore. This is a very crappy event, and Goldberg turns heel in an awful main event. If you're into really torturing yourself, go and check this out on the WWE Network. Okay, 16 years ago, on June 11th, 2006, WWE presented ECW One Night Stand. The show would serve as a relaunch of ECW, and Rob Van Dam telegraphed his cashing in of his Money in the Bank contract to go against John Cena that night, and that's when people were holding signs saying, "If Cena wins, we riot." They threw his shirt back from the audience multiple times. It was a raucous crowd there, and that was the second year in a row doing the One Night Stand. And I'm currently listening to Eric Bischoff talking about the first One Night Stand on 83 Weeks, where he came in and was leading a anti-ECW group of WWE guys. So it's been a good listen, and Eric doesn't remember much of that show because he's performing in it. And yeah, definitely check it out because that's also in this next group of events. 31 years ago, on June 12th, 1991, WCW presented Clash of the Champions 15 from Knoxville, USA. 17 years ago, on June 12th, 2005, WWE presented the very first ECW One Night Stand. Born from the mind of Rob Van Dam came this ECW reunion spectacular. Tommy Dreamer would be a point man on this one. He'd write, produce, and main event the pay-per-view. The record sales of the DVD Rise and Fall of ECW helped convince the WWE brass that this pay-per-view would be a great idea. And it was. Stone Cold Steve Austin made an unannounced cameo appearance as well. Some of the matches included Lance Storm defeating Chris Jericho, Super Crazy defeating Tajiri and Little Guido in a 3-way match. Rey Mysterio defeated Psychosis, Sabu pinned Rhino, Chris Benoit defeated Eddie Guerrero, Mike Awesome defeated Masato Tanaka, and the main event had the Dudley Boys defeat Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman. 11 years ago, on June 12th, 2011, TNA presented Slammiversary 9 from the Impact Zone in Universal Studios Orlando. 30 years ago, On June 13th, 1992, the World Bodybuilding Federation presented the second WBF Championship from Long Beach Convention Center and Convention and Entertainment Center. The second year was worse than the first, if that could even be possible. They booked their host, and that fell through in Lou Ferrigno. Then they tried Lex Luger, but it was just in a car accident. For the competition, they didn't look physically in shape, as the show was stringent with drug testing rules, and McMahon was under investigation for steroid distribution. The buy rate was so poor that most cable outlets reported to have a 0 buy rate. It was the lowest grossing event in pay-per-view history at the time. Gary Stridham won the event for the second straight year. Just a month after the competition, Vince McMahon folded the WBF with $15 million in losses posted. Crazy. 23 years ago.
I wish I had a shirt.
Yeah, true. 32 years ago, on June 13th, 1990, WCW presented NWA Clash of the Champions 9. Coastal Crush from South Carolina. And my final one before I tag out, 29 years ago, on June 13th, 1993, WWF presented the first pay-per-view edition of King of the Ring from the Nutter Center in Dayton, Ohio. This was the 7th King of the Ring tournament dating back to 1985.
23 years ago, June 13th, 1999, WCW presented the Great American Bash. Sid Vicious would return to WCW at this event. 18 years ago, June 13th, 2004, WWE presented Bad Blood. 13 years ago, June 13th, 2009, Ring of Honor presented Manhattan Mayhem 3. The show began with a 10-bell salute to the late Mitsuhiro Misawa, who died earlier in the day. 12 years ago, June 13th, 2010, TNA would present Slammiversary 8. 33 years ago, June 14th, 1989, WCW presented NWA Clash of the Champions 7. Guts and Glory from the Ritz Epps Fitness Center in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The event would include the conclusion of a tournament to decide the new NWA Tag Champs. And apparently the crowd was drunk and sweating like pigs because there was no AC. It was in the triple digits inside the arena. 24 years ago, June 14th, 1998, WCW presented the Great American Bash. 7 years ago, on June 14th, 2015, WWE presented its Money in the Bank from Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, sometimes they need to not telegraph their direction when they put the winner of the Money in the Bank on the poster.
Yeah. 31 years ago, June 15th, 1991, the World Bodybuilding Federation presented the first WBF champion from the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This stemmed from a booth bought by Vince McMahon at the 1990 Mr. Olympia event to promote a magazine, but turned out to be the announcement of the formation of the WBF. Some say the competition was rigged, as the top 5 finished were the top 5 paid body stars by the WBF, but no proof has surfaced. The pay was good, as some were making close to 7 to 10 times more than over at the International Federation of Bodybuilders. 25 years ago, June 15th, 1997, WCW presented another Great American Bash. 20 years ago, on June 15th, 2002, Major League Wrestling presented its first ever event, Genesis from Philly. It was highlighted by an 8-man tournament to crown the first MLW World Heavyweight Champion. 19 years ago, June 15th, 2003, WWE presented Bad Blood from Houston. This was the first brand-exclusive pay-per-view in the U.S., as only Raw wrestlers were featured on the show. 30 years ago, June 16th, 1992, WCW presented Clash of the Champions 19, and 1 year before that, they would present. Oh, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. Well, yeah, I guess it is. Okay. So, and a year before that, they presented the Clash of the Champions 18. The Roman numerals messing up my brain. The show was noted for in-ring return of Ric Flair in WCW. WCW had him doing a talk segment called Flair for the Gold as he waited out his no-compete clause with the WWF. The show was both the lowest rated and least watched Clash to date, and the Hollywood Blondes would end up taking the fall for the low ratings.
Yep, and they stupidly got split up. And Flair for the Gold had the Penthouse interview segments where Miss Fifi was there, and he's currently back with Wendy Barlow after splitting for a while. But, yeah, so who knows? All I know is next month he plans on doing his final match.
Hey, you got to give it to him. He's old as hell, and he still can go.
With his pacemaker.
Well, yeah, hey, with a pacemaker, why not make history? He's a ticking time bomb, so you might as well. I think he'd be happy if he went out in the ring.
Probably.
26 years ago, June 16th, 1996, WCW presented the Great American Bash. The show was noted for the Scott Hall and Kevin Nash returning to pay-per-view for WCW as they were interviewed by Eric Bischoff. This interview was for legal purposes to confirm that Nash nor Hall were working for the WWF. Moments later, Bischoff was powerbombed through the stage when he did not give the names of the three people that they would face the Outsiders in a match. Of course, that whole angle of Bischoff, them taking Bischoff and putting him through the stage was just silly because, well, it was a couple months later that he turned out to be, of course, a part of the NWO.
Yeah.
It's
good booking.
10 years ago, June 16, 2012, New Japan Pro Wrestling presented Dominion 6.16 from Osaka, Japan. The show's main event was named the Match of the Year by Tokyo Sports Magazine. 9 years ago, June 16, 2013, WWE presented Payback. And finally, and Shawn will take us into the title changes. 9 years ago, June 16th, 2013, AAA presented Triple Mania 21 from Mexico City. The show was to be the first internet pay-per-view for AAA, but due to technical difficulties, the show was shown free on YouTube and offered refunds to those that purchased. The show was to be AAA's first internet pay-per-view, but Ustream were unable to air the show due to technical difficulties, forcing Ustream offer refunds to anyone that purchased the event. All right, so title changes.
Yeah, we'll tag in for that. 39 years ago, on June 10th, 1983, from St. Louis, Missouri, Harley Race defeated Ric Flair 2-1 in a best-of-three falls match to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. This would end Flair's 631-day run as champion. June 10th, 2012, Brooke Tossmacher defeated Gail Kim to win the TNA Knockouts Championship. AJ Styles and Kurt Angle defeated Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian to win the TNA World Tag Team Championships on the same show. June 11th, 2006, Rob Van Dam defeated John Cena in an Extreme Rules match to win the WWE Championship. 35 years ago, June 12th, 1987, in Tokyo, Japan, Antonio Inoki defeated Masa Saito in a tournament finals to become the first IWGP Heavyweight Champion. The New Japan Pro Wrestling founder would hold the title for 325 days before a fractured foot forced him to vacate the title. Surprisingly, this is the only time Inoki held the title. 24 years ago, on June 12, 1998, in Tokyo, Japan, Kenta Kobashi defeated Kawada to win the All Japan Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. 22 years ago, on June 12, 2000, on Raw's War from St. Louis, Missouri, Crash Holly defeated Gerald Briscoe to win the WWF Hardcore Championship. June 12, 2011, Mr. Anderson defeated Sting to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. 21 years ago, on June 12, 2001, at SmackDown taping in Baltimore, Test defeated Rhino for the WWF Hardcore Championship. 82 years ago, on June 13, 1940, in Kansas City, Missouri, Orville Brown defeated Bobby Burns to win the Kansas City version of the Midwest Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship. This was his first of 11 reigns. June 13th, 1993, Bret Hart would survive 3 rounds to become the WWE King of the Ring. Jerry Lawler would confront Bret during the coronation ceremony. June 13th, 1993, Yokozuna defeated Hulk Hogan to win the WWF Championship. This was the last WWF pay-per-view for Hogan, as he would retire for a little bit before joining WCW. He went off to go film Thunder in Paradise over on Universal Studios, and, well, since WCW was there, why not? June 13th, 1999, Ric Flair defeated Roddy Piper by disqualification with the help of Buff Bagwell, giving Ric Flair not only the win, but the new president of WCW title. The Jersey Triad, Diamond Dallas Page and Kanyon, defeated Chris Benoit and Perry Saturn to win the WCW World Tag Team Championships. June 13th, 2004, Trish Stratus defeated Victoria, Lita, Gail Kim in a 4-way match to win the WWE Women's Championship. June 13th, 2009, Extreme Tiger defeated Alex Kozlov, Crazy Boy, and Alan Stone in an elimination hardcore match to win the AAA Cruiserweight Championship. Also, Dr. Wagner Jr. defeated El Messias to win the AAA World Heavyweight Championship. June 13th, 2009, Austin Aries defeated Jerry Lynn and Tyler Black in a 3-way dance to become the first 2-time Ring of Honor champion. Nigel McGuinness was the special enforcer for this match. 65 years ago, on June 14th, 1957, in Chicago, Illinois, Edouard Carpentier defeated Lou Thesz 2-1 in a best-of-3 falls match to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. But since Carpentier won on a referee's decision to call the match when Thesz was deemed unable to continue, most parts of the world still considered Thesz the champion. Only a handful of territories considered Carpentier as the world champ. 40 years ago, June 14th, 1982, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne defeated the East-West Connection, Adrian Adonis, and Justy the Body Ventura to win the AWA World Tag Team Championships. And I'm tagging in to Jonesy for more title changes. You are muted, sir. Okay, so we'll continue with that. June 14th, 1989, the Fabulous Freebirds, Jimmy Garvin and Michael Hayes, defeated the Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, to win the vacant NWA World Tag Team Championship. 29 years ago, on June 14th, 1993, in Columbus, Ohio, the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, defeated Money Inc., Ted DiBiase, and Erwin R. Shyster to win the WWF Tag Team Championships. Then, 2 days later, it went back to Money Inc., just for them to cough it back up 3 days later. Hot potato with the titles.
June 14th, 1998, Chris Jericho defeated Dean Malenko by DQ to win the vacant WCW Cruiserweight Championship. Booker T defeated Fit Finlay to win the WCW World Television Championship. Goldberg would defeat Conan quickly, retaining the U.S. belt, and was his 100th win. Sting defeated the Giant to win both WCW Tag Team Championships. The win allowed Sting to choose his own partner to become tag champions with Sting. Sting would choose Kevin Nash.
Now, I'm just trying to check here. You may or may not have had an actual cough, but I think it was a little sarcastic cough there.
It was a sarcastic cough.
When you said 100th victory for Goldberg, do you not believe in WCW math?
No, actually, I do not have trouble enough with regular math. And
remember, these are people who were employing Scott Steiner, and Steiner could have been the one doing the math for them.
Very possible. Goldberg, hey, give him his due. He was a big integral part of WCW's later years, but just some of the things they did with him, pumping in his chants and all that, it just, to me, it kind of ruined it a little bit. But yeah, he got that 100th win. I guess it's very similar to tournaments in Rio de Janeiro and other things like that, where you just got to go with it. It's there's cracks in the storylines, just like other TV shows.
Maybe his victories were in Rio.
They could have been. There you go. That would explain it. 12 years ago, June 14th, 2010, on Raw from Charlotte, North Carolina, The Miz defeated R-Truth, John Morrison, and Zack Ryder in a fatal four-way match to win the WWE US belt. June 14th, 2015, the Primetime Players, Darren Young and Titus O'Neil defeated the New Day, Big E, and Xavier Woods to win the WWE Tag Team belts. 16 years ago, June 14th, 2016, at a TNA Impact taping at Universal Orlando, Mike Bennett defeated Eddie Edwards to win the TNA X Division Championship. 43 years ago, June 15th, 1979, in Tupelo, Mississippi, the Blonde Bombers, Wayne Ferris and Larry Letham, defeated Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee to win the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship. Of course, Wayne Ferris became the Honky Tonk Man. Do we know who Larry Latham became?
No, but looking at the Blonde Bombers, it would be hard to imagine that's Honky, especially with the blazing blonde hair.
I agree. I mean, maybe if you got better close-ups of his face, some of the tapings weren't the clearest, so it's very hard to tell who's who. But yeah, it's always neat that these guys that became names had careers long before they became famous for what they were known for, if that made any sense. 43 years ago, June, I already did that one. After the match, the wrestlers continued the brawl all the way to the concession stand, which they destroyed. After the brawl, there was blood and mustard stains lining the hall. This would become known as the Tupelo Concession Stand Brawl, though it wasn't the first brawl to go to the concession stands. The 1979 match was shown unedited the next day on Memphis TV. This match some consider to be the birth of hardcore wrestling. I've seen the match. Personally, I didn't think much of it, but it's there on YouTube if you want to go check it out. June 15th, 2002, Shane Douglas defeated Vampiro and Taio K in a three-way match to become the first MLW World Heavyweight Champ. 18 years ago, June 15th, 2004, at a SmackDown taping in Chicago, Illinois, Rey Mysterio defeated Chavo Guerrero Sr. to win the WWE Cruiserweight Championship. Chavo would be released because of no showing 2 house shows. The WWE didn't buy his "I was drugged and kidnapped" excuse. Yeah, they could have used it as a storyline. I don't know.
True.
Also, the Dudley Boys defeated Charlie Haas and Rico to win the WWE Tag Team Championship. This would make the Dudleys the first team to win both the Raw and SmackDown titles. June 15th, 2009, Randy Orton defeated John Cena, The Big Slow, and Triple H in a fatal four-way match to win the vacated WWE Championship. The title was vacated 5 days earlier when Batista suffered a torn tricep. June 16th, 2012, Jushin Thunder Liger in Tiger Mask defeated Suzuki Gun, consisting of Tashi and Taka Michinoku, to win the vacated IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team belts. Hiroshi Tanahashi defeated Kensuke Okada, I love butchering his first name, to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship belt. And finally, before we finish up birthdays, June 16th, 2013, Curtis Axel defeated Wade Barrett and The Miz in a triple threat match to win the WWE Intercontinental Championship. This made Curtis Axel the first father and son duo to both hold the IC belt. His father, of course, Mr. Perfect. AJ Lee defeated Caitlyn to win the WWE Divas belt. And Alberto Del Rio defeated Dolph Ziggler to win the World Heavyweight Championship.
So a lot of title changes, and rightfully so, considering the amount of events that we also just covered. So a lot of tossing of gold during this week in wrestling. And as you said, we're going to finish off with our birthdays. And we'll start with June 14th. Buzz Sawyer turns 63, or would have turned 63. Peter Avalon turns 33 on June 14th. June 15th, Brad Armstrong would have turned 60. June 15th, Chuck Palumbo turns 51. On June 15th, Cesar Bononi turns 36. June 15th also was the birthday for Scott Norton, who turns 61. And turning 33 on June 15th, Bayley, who is our other spotlighted superstar. She was born, as I said, June 15th, 1989, turning 33 in San Jose, California. She was trained by Jason Styles, Sarah Del Rey, WWE Performance Center employees as well. She debuted September 2008 and has worked in NXT and WWE, plus, of course, some indie spots when she was known as Davina Rose. Now, when it comes to her career, not much to speak of as Davina Rose, but she signed with the WWE in 2012, made her main roster debut in 2016. She's the first woman to defend a title in Saudi Arabia, and she's the first four horsewoman to actually complete everything possible for the women, as she was a one-time NXT Women's Champion, though she could go back to NXT and try and get those tag team titles. One-time WWE Raw Women's Champion, two-time and longest reigning SmackDown Women's Champion, two-time WWE Women's Tag Team Champion, and a Money in the Bank winner. I think the only person who has something more than her is Asuka, who has a Royal Rumble win. As far as accolades recognized by the fans and PWI Magazine, she got the Feud of the Year in 2020 against Sasha, PWI Inspirational Wrestler of the Year in 2015 and 2016, PWI Match of the Year in 2015 versus Sasha Banks at NXT TakeOver Respect, PWA Tag Team of the Year in 2020 while teaming with Sasha Banks. She was ranked number one top 100 women in 2020 by PWI and number 3 PWI top 50 tag teams in 2020 with Sasha Banks. So it's pretty good to get in that category because I think the PWI 50 tag teams is male and female, and to be number 3, pretty impressive at that rate. So happy birthday to the hugger or former hugger, Ding Dong Bayley, who is still out, though, unfortunately, with a torn ACL.
I'd accept a hug from her any day.
And you want to finish off our birthdays?
Sure. I was just looking on Google here. The that Larry Wayne Booker, that team with Wayne Ferris, he turned out to be Moondog Spot. Yeah, Moondog Spot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, Google. And finally, the last of the birthdays, June 14th. Oh no, wait, I went back up. We did miss Bruiser Brody, I believe.
No, that's a typo.
He's
in next week's episode.
Oh, he's in next week's. Oh, I'm just screwing it all up, aren't I? Oh well. June 16th, the Ultimate Warrior was born in 1959. He would have turned
63.
63. Also on the 16th, Rizar was born in 1994, so he turns 38. Paul Jones turns 80 years old. Sweet Daddy Siki was born in 1940. I don't believe he's alive anymore.
Would have turned 82?
Yeah, he would have turned 82, but I'm pretty sure he passed away. And if you didn't, I'm sorry, I'm killing you off. Also on June 16th, Whisper Nitro Girl was born on the same year I was, 1973, so she's 49.
She's also known as Mrs. Heartbreak Kid, Rebecca Hickenbottom.
Oh, there you go. Nice. June 16th, Jungle Boy was born in 1997, which makes him 25.
And if you were reading this as JR, you'd call him Jungle Boy Jack Perry.
Why
Jack son Perry? Of Luke Perry.
But why Jack? Oh, okay. Sure.
It's JR.
JR. June 16th, the last birthday is a happy 59th birthday to James Fullington, a.k.a. five-time ECW World Heavyweight Champion, the original drinking guy, at least between ECW and Stone Cold Steve Austin, was the Sandman.
So yes, happy birthday to everybody who was listed. We'll have more birthdays, headlines, event changes, title changes, and everything that goes along with our shows in next week's episode.
All right. Of course, the sponsors. We're going to start with This Week in Wrestling History. Of course, was compiled from the land of Google, Wikipedia, CagesideSeats.com, and most importantly, of course, from everybody, including journalists, that wrote everything down so that we can enjoy it still today. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Coolbet, Coolbet.com, and sportsbook betting and casino games. Stay cool and bet responsibly. And
of course, shout out to our other sponsor, Hammerlock Pure Wrestling. Saturday, July 9th, Jobsite Brewing Company presents Hammerlock Pure Wrestling at the Jobsite Brewing Company, and tickets are $20. Doors open at 6, bell time 7. And the following weekend, Nancy Powers Photography presents Hammerlock Pure Wrestling Saturday, July 16th from the Portuguese Canadian Club in Strathroy, Ontario. Doors open at 6, bell time 7. All our events are family friendly and seats are just $20 per person. You don't want to miss Hammerlock Pure Wrestling, bringing back the golden age of pro wrestling. So I want to thank everybody for being a part of this show. Reach out to us on all our social medias. Email us scumbagswrestling@gmail.com and check out our website for Predictions League news and everything else going on at scumbagswrestling.ca. And until... Right, I did say you had some announcements to make yourself, Chris.
Oh, of course.
Where are you going to be the next couple of weeks?
Well, I'm heading down to London shortly for the children's festival, which was called the Kids Expo, but Family Shows got the rights to the children's festival name, and was given the blessing by the people that started that. And it's in Victoria Park. It starts on the 17th at 11 a.m. in the morning and goes till Sunday, I'd say till 6 or 7. There's rides there. And the ride price is usually $20. It might be $25 this year. I'm not exactly sure. And lots of vendors, food, lots of some free activities for the kids. I believe the Boy Scouts are going to be there with some of their activities, and an all good family fun weekend. And of course, after that, we then set up for the International Food Festival, which usually hosts about 40 food vendors and craft vendors. And there's also entertainment that weekend, including 3-time Grammy winner, and I can't remember how many times the man's been nominated, but of course, the Polka King, Walter Olstenak, I believe he's playing at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. It will be a sea of gray, but it is, if you like polka, come on down. And I believe it's that day, but it's either before or after. There is a surf band called... the name is escaping right now, but they're around London, Ontario, playing usually once a month, and go check them out. If you love surf music with a lot of guitar and drums, they'll blow you away. And
Excellent.
That is what I'm doing for the next couple of weeks.
Tons of great weekends full of family activities, whether you come to London for the festivals or go to Stratford and Strathroy for great pro wrestling action. Be sure to support all the local talent that are putting their best foot forward, especially getting out of the pandemic and trying to reclaim normalcy. So thank you for joining us. Need any more information, go check out our socials, and we will be there to help with anything you have to ask. So until next time, have a great one.